Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. We're really excited for this webinar with Sarah and Kathy from GatherRound. My name is Jess. I'm a marketing associate at Playground, and we've been really looking forward to this event about family engagement. I know that Sarah and Kathy want this to be interactive, so feel free to chime in the chat, or I think there will be moments where you can even come off mute and maybe share whatever you like. So there will be a moment at the end where we'll have a Q&A as well, but I hope you all enjoy this. And for those of you who are watching on the recording, thank you for coming as well. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Jess. So grateful to you and to Playground for having us here today, and so thrilled to be here with all of you. My name is Sarah Koffler. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am one half of GatherRound along with my amazing partner, Kathy Pomer. We are an early childhood consulting agency who is working hard every day to transform the future of early childhood education. We support schools, communities, many of your own, some of you who are on here with us today, and are thinking always about advocacy, about changing the world, and about moving all of us forward in the field of early childhood education. I'm really excited to turn it over to Kathy to kick us off today.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much, Jess, and everybody at Playground for asking us to be here today. And to all of you that are showing up here live and all of you that are watching the recording, we know how busy our worlds are, and just even making time to think about engaging with each other is one of the most important things we can do to just change everything for the better. I'm going to do a little bit of a longer inclusive introduction, and I'm going to see if some of you can think about why I'm doing that. I'm Kathy Pomer. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am coming to you from the traditional land of the Wabanaki and the Ndakina and the Alcoquisco here in what is now known as Portland, Maine. I'm usually coming to you from just south of DC and the land of the Piscataway. I have white skin and am a cisgendered woman in my late 50s. I have dark hair through the wonders of chemistry, not necessarily as dark today as it sometimes can be, but it's always covered up by my signature red lipstick, some glasses that I have on here, and I'm wearing today a black top that is sleeveless. I am hoping that you're able to hear and take those cues to see what you need to see. If you are interested, there is closed captioning available to all of you. We try to make sure that you are as comfortable and as engaged as you can possibly be in all times that we get together, both in real life and also in this new form of real life known as Zoom and screens like that are virtual. So if there's anything that any of us can do, Sarah, Jess, or myself, to help you really be present and take this moment to engage with us and leave this meeting thinking differently, please let us know, because we don't want anything to come between where you are and where we all need to be. I did mention that I was going to ask some of you folks out there about why, and thank you, Erica. Thank you for that great introduction. Why do you think in the world I went into such great depth, and just what does it make you think about? And please just go off mute and let me know. Let us all know. Or anything in there that made you wonder why I did that.
Thank you, Kathy. Just the hearing that you are on land that isn't yours, doesn't belong to perhaps any of us. And so recognizing that, I think that's really important. Your pronouns are very important. I identify with the same pronouns. I too have chemistry in my head, hair rather, not my head. I have no chemistry in my head. I also think for those who may be accessing this with just audio, it gives them a sense of who is talking to us and the importance for creating accessibility for everyone, which is what we want for our children. So thanks for that introduction.
Thank you, Amy. And yes, I do. I agree. It's something we want for our children. And I think it's something we just assume with other adults. I think that we just assume you all can see me, or that I can even see you. We assume that we can all hear the same kinds of things. And we don't normalize the idea that we need what we each need in order to engage. This being talk, an interactive talk about engagement, has to be interactive, because how else could it be engagement? I can't talk at you all about that. And in fact, if you're comfortable in some way, if you are comfortable in this way, going off of the mute, you're welcome to stay on mute for a few more minutes, but maybe showing your screen or in some way, as Jess invited you, sharing anything that comes to mind. I think we need to normalize that learning and engagement is a two-way street. And in fact, the very best way that we could have learning and engagement, actually, Sarah, I think we've got a slide that's going to represent this, is when we come together as community. I think one of the most important things that we can do is come together as community, because there is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about. And I think that we spend so much time in transactional care and not relational care, in almost thinking that in the world of early care and education, we might sort of be the folks at the back of the room with the cash register as families check out at the end of the day, and make sure that we've got the right number of dry socks or wet socks or bathing suits for tomorrow, and the kids are all accounted for. And while that is important, all of that is important, can you imagine what would happen as a community if we could decide every day, with every moment, technological and in person, to engage in both ways and all ways as a community? So I want to invite you at this moment to think about just whatever comes to mind. And I think the question might even be on the next slide. What does engagement mean to you? And really, in this case, what is family engagement? I want to stress that some people that I used to, talk to this about said, well, I don't work in teaching and I don't really deal with young children. And what I think is so important is how quickly we decide in our professional lives that we might not be part of that family engagement, no matter if we were ever a child, or we probably were, or if we're adults now. And I think I just want to know in the chat, what is family engagement to you? Just anything that comes to mind. And let's just see if we can have a couple ideas in here, just to think about what that means. Y'all came here, so it must have some kind of value. Thank you, Abby. Building trust and connection, so important. Oh, gorgeous. Inclusive, trust building, fun, equal. Sarah, take it away. Think here about this chat with us.
Relationships with all family members. Love that we're risk-free. Absolutely, building trust. It's cumulative. It builds over time. Love that we can add little emojis to each other's comments, the ones that are really resonating for each of us. Feel free to continue adding into the chat box. These are so inspiring. So important that we think about our own definition of what family engagement means to us. Oh, there we go. Communication, understanding, connection. I love that. This idea of relationship building is really rising up to the top through all of these comments. So it's important, non-judgmental. Absolutely. Feel free to keep on adding as more ideas come to you. And as we define family engagement for ourselves, that's so important that we have a clear idea of what it is that's most important to us, what speaks to us, how we move forward. And it's also helpful when there's some research behind us. For those of us in the education field that many of us, if not all of us are, we know there's been research out there for years and years about best practices in early childhood and early care and education, in all education, and family engagement. It's a little bit newer that we are really giving some thought to this. And thank goodness there are places that are giving some real deep and detailed thought to it. So we wanted to share a little bit of some of the research, some of the data, some of the language that's out there about family engagement that so gorgeously complements all of these ideas that you're sharing with us in the chat box. So if we take a look at the great state of Connecticut, anyone here from Connecticut? Any takers? I know some of you are close by to Connecticut, but just over the border. But here's what the Connecticut State Department of Education tells us. Family engagement is a full, equal, and equitable partnership among families, educators, and community partners to promote children's learning and development from birth through college and career. I love, again, that idea of partnership, connection that's rising to the top. Would anyone mind reading for us what some of these Connecticut parents said over on the right side of the screen? Someone hop off mute and read that, please.
Family.
Oh, sorry, Amy.
At the same
Our-
time.
Oh, that's okay. You can go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Family engagement means that parents are seen as welcome partners in the education of children and have a valued voice in the school. As a result, families are active participants and communication is flowing between home and school. We believe that family engagement means mutual respect, honesty, and trust.
Thank you, Abby. I love that last line. I love all of it, but that last line, mutual respect, honesty, and trust. My gosh, if that's what we thought about everything in our life, what a different world we would be living in. I know that's what we all bring to everything that we do, but how powerful, respect, honesty, and trust. Here's another definition, some more thought about family engagement from Vanderbilt University. Someone else want to read this quote for us?
Go. Research shows that family engagement is regarded as a best practice in education. Decades of research has shown that parent involvement is a powerful influence on children's educational success.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Best practice, connecting with families, having deep, meaningful relationships and connections to one another is a best practice. Again, we've all known that for a long time, but how reassuring and revolutionary is it to have that in our data, to have that as something that is truly guiding the way for all of us. We also love this image that also came right out of the Iris Center that sort of shows us these three different pillars, so to speak, about family engagement. Getting to know families, meaningfully involving families, building positive relationships is what leads to family engagement. And truth be told, this is true about any kind of engagement, right? This sort of equation, so to speak, is true of everything in our lives. When we get to know people, when we meaningfully are involved with them and we're building positive relationships, we have these engaged, meaningful, deep relationships. I'm going to show one other image, a bit of research. I know this is a little bit of a larger image and hopefully it's clear on your screens, but it comes straight out of Head Start and it's their parent, family, and community engagement framework. We won't go through every detail on here, but what we thought was most powerful that we wanted to share is this idea that when our program areas, what's sort of over here, our program foundations and areas of impact are strong, once that's the case, we really have readied ourselves to build positive relationships. Now, of course, we are always ready to build positive relationships, but when these two come together, when our foundations are strong and our relationships are strong, that is how we create positive and strong outcomes, which is the goal that we all have, right? To have positive, wonderful outcomes, yes, for the children in our programs, but also for us as educators and professionals, for the families who are in our community. Because what's most important for us to always remember is that we are all stakeholders in early care and education. Yes, it is the children, of course, first and foremost, but the families and the educators together, we come together as the most important stakeholders that are part of every child's journey and part of our process. And we can improve those outcomes when we're focused on the things that are most important to us. So this is all great research, really important. What does it really mean for us? How do we bring these takeaways to our work, to our practice, to everything we do every day without needing to pull out these beautiful charts, as beautiful as they are and as important as they are, but how do we really realize all of this in our practice? We wanted to give a quick opportunity to do a little bit of goal setting. And of course, should we have all the time in the world, which trust me, Kathy and I could talk about this for all the time in the world, but for the sake of our conversation today, we wanted to give a list of goals that we might all look at together to think about what our education and engagement goals might be, having all of this in mind. What does it mean to be engaged? What does it mean to be in deep relationships with families, with others in our community? So on this next slide, is that all able to be seen on your screens? I know the font's a little small. Good, I'm seeing thumbs up. Perfect, thank you. I want to take a moment to invite each of you to read through this list of different goals that might speak to you. What speaks to you today might be different than what speaks to you tomorrow. If you're anything like me, you might say, oh, I like that one, and that one, and that one. Oh, and that one too. But I wonder if for the purposes of today's conversation, you might take a moment or two, look at this list and think to yourself about the one that speaks most to you at this moment in time. we'll come back together in a minute or two, and I'll be eager to hear some sharings from those who are comfortable and eager to do so. What are the statements that really speak out to you most, jump out to you most at this moment in time? Anyone feels ready to share, feel free to hop off mute and let us know what spoke to you and why.
Sarah and Kathy, I love my education and engagement goal is to enter into relationships that reveal and support curiosity and rich imagination of children.
Tell us more. Why is that the one that spoke to you today, Amy?
A colleague of mine, the two of us, we were talking today about goal setting for our upcoming professional, not just our professional development, but our staff and our families and our children, our entry points with them, what they're good at, where they can grow. And it was becoming more child-centered. So that feels very comfortable, and understanding that curiosity and imagination of children, in fact, is perhaps our curriculum.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
I'll share.
Yeah.
I really like my education engagement goal is to help adults explore their ideas in their role of raising and educating children. And that's because I used to be a toddler teacher at our school, and I was a good teacher. I was very proud of my classroom, and I thought I was so good. And I was, but now after becoming a mother to 2 young children and just becoming more of a leader in our school, it's really changed my perspective and given me an added layer. And it has shown me that there's so much more we can offer. And so a lot of our professional development is focused on like regulating ourselves, which I have found to be very effective in my own parenting. And so that's been really important to me.
Beautiful, so important. And that reflective nature that you just described of being able to look at where we've each come from individually as professionals and allow that to help guide our path forward, but also help us know where our next steps are is so important. Thanks, Abby. But one more.
One that stood out for me is my education and engagement goal is to create opportunities for families and professionals to learn together. I feel that we always talk about engagement from families, but do we really set up these opportunities for them to come in and get together with the professionals that we have working under us as leaders? I feel like we need to create these opportunities to get them more engaged, get them more in the buildings, and to support what's going on.
Couldn't agree more, Erica. That's beautiful and so important. That idea of partnership where we started today's conversation has to be a part of everything we do moving forward. And we need to help create those opportunities as leaders in our schools. So thank you so much for sharing that. As we said before, each of these are so important at different moments in time, on different days, depending on what might have happened earlier that day. A different goal might speak to us at a different moment. But I think what's most important is that we have our path forward. We know what's most important. Our values guide our way, and we're continually setting goals to improve the work that we're doing, to strengthen the relationships that we have, and continue our path forward. Kathy, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you so much to all of you for that. I'm also going to mention, Erica, that the one you chose today is the one that I'm choosing today as well. And I do think, actually, because of bits of what you all just mentioned, I used to think it was enough to just be an educator and sort of think about having this experience to think about things in the world and make them better. But without engagement and without engaging together, it's almost impossible to really get out of our silo and understand what it's like from another perspective. And I really think that those of us in communal work and agency work, or those of us that are really trying to figure out ways we can all communicate better, I think that's a huge 21st century skill that we're all working on. Cannot do it alone. Communication is not something you just do to yourself. And I really think that if we're looking for actual transformative change, it's got to come when we are all learning together, and not just thinking of a child as a learner, but thinking about waking up the curiosity in each one of us. So thank you all so much for sharing. I find this to be such an incredibly interesting provocation. Sarah, if you can go to the next slide, I'll let you know that also the National Association for the Education of Young Children also feels that engagement and family engagement is very important. There are so many different standards that they use so that we have a shared vocabulary about how to come together around things that we think are the most important. Although there are 10, and if you don't know what they are, just look up NAEYC, National Association for the Education of Young Children, and you'll be able to know all 10. We took the liberty of pulling 2 of them from here. Whoops, there we go. Thank you. We took the liberty of pulling 2 of them that we thought really had to do with what we were talking about today. The first, all of us have been talking about relationships. It is by far the most important thing we can have. I really feel that when we realize that every single touch point, every single day gives us an opportunity to build a more trusting relationship, that is what moves the needle on the markers of any success we are looking for. The program promotes positive relationships among all children and adults. It encourages each child's sense of individual worth and belonging as part of a community, and fosters each child's ability to contribute as a responsible community member. Back in the olden days, there used to be this idea that the relationships would be built from adult to adult, which is also very important. And you might, just spoiler alert, know that families is coming up in the next standard that we're about to share with you. But if we're not thinking of children as being able to be part of this engaged community, we are missing not only that which will create impact on others, but that which creates impact on us. I feel like one of the most important retention tools we can have in early care and education, and just about any trade these days, are relationships that make you feel important, make you feel seen, make you feel heard, and make you feel like you'd like to come back to grow more with the community you are with. Warm, sensitive, and responsive relationships help children feel secure. The safe and secure environments built by positive relationships help children thrive physically, benefit from learning experiences, and cooperate and get along with others. And I have to tell you, as much as I'd like to say that that's only for the children, that's how humans are. We happen to be, I haven't really checked in and I don't want to make any assumptions, but I believe we are all humans on this call here today, even all of those that are listening into the recording. And I feel as if we need to know that when we're thinking about learning and connection and being able to be open enough to engage, that has to be all of us, and no one can be excluded from that. So this first one about relationships is super important. And in fact, we could spend a long time just talking about this, but what if, Sarah, on the next slide, we're able to also think about standard number 7. You'll have to look up NAEYC to figure out what the other ones are, but these are the most important today. Families, and this doesn't mean instead of that first standard. This is just a way to now have that first standard in your head and now let this family idea wash in and think about how that changes the nature of relationships. I'm going to do the reading here so that you can do the thinking about it. The program establishes and maintains collaborative relationships. Look at that. There it is again. Nothing without relationships. With each child's family to foster children's development in all settings. These relationships are sensitive to family composition, language, and culture. To support children's optimal learning and development, programs need to establish relationships with families based on mutual trust and respect, involve families in their children's educational growth, and encourage families to fully participate in the program. I want to remind you at the very beginning of this hour that I did an inclusive introduction to make sure that it did not feel like a big one-sided, hope you're taking notes, this is who I am, and I'm just a name and a title in an organization. I am those things also, but I am so much more. And if I can use my identity to find entry points for anyone out there, then we are able to engage and move forward together. And if we can do that with families both ways, not just saying, make sure you bring the dry socks tomorrow, but truly learning from what it is people are looking for, this is where we become unstoppable. So Sarah, what do we do with that information? And what can we do today with that information?
So let's dive in. These standards are so important and guide us forward in so many ways. And how do we do that? Well, Kathy and I were thinking about some questions that really make us think from these standards and from the experiences that we each all bring. A few different questions, and we'll start with just the first for right now, that help us make sense of everything that we just heard, everything that we know is so important to all of us, to our national accreditation bodies that we are so inspired by, and to each of our programs and each of the work that we do. So one question to ask ourselves that allows us to first dive a little deeper is, how do we form connections amongst families and educators in your program? Over the course of this hour, we've heard from so many of you that it's one of the most important things that we do, that it guides you forward in so many ways. But in a more logistical fashion, how do you do that? What does that look like for you in your practice? Feel free to jump off mute if you're more comfortable utilizing the chat box. Let us know, how do you form those connections and relationships?
Maybe you'll think back on something that was a really successful one that you felt so good about. And we'll keep this slide up to make sure that it not only feels a little safer for folks to jump in and talk, but also so that you remember the question that we're thinking about. Tell us about those connections that you're making and feeling good about.
So one of the things we actually do, we have a meet the teacher before school starts. So parents go into the classroom and get to meet the teacher. And even though we're Montessori, so sometimes those kids are in the same classroom 3 years in a row with the same teacher, it's still a chance for the parents to go in and engage with the teacher. Of course, there's parent-teacher conferences, but then we also have 2 events every year that are outside of school hours, one of those being the fall festival, and teachers run the games. So the parents and the kids come and they get to see the teachers outside of school. And then we have a big fundraising gala for our nonprofit that the teachers are required to go to because it's a casual setting and it's an adult only event. So they get to actually just talk as adults, not with kids running around distracting constantly either. So we try to have, a few things like that every year. We have those 2 for sure. And then a few other things like International Day and stuff, but those 2 are big ones.
Love that. Love that. Finding the balance between opportunities that exist sort of in the day-to-day of our school life and making sure we're prioritizing that before the start of the school year, whatever it might be, but also carving out really intentional time for the adults in a child's life, their educators and their family members to connect with each other. Beautiful. What else?
Sometimes just drop off and pick up are beautiful opportunities to help families transition and caretakers transition. It's a really stressful time. They're rushing in and out. And so to provide some smiles, some, check-ins about something you may know that's going on in their life. We also communicate with an app. I'm sure many of us do for programs or for facilities. So that's a way to individually highlight some fun points during the day that then create talking points for later on, both at home for kids and families and caretakers, but for us, throughout the week. So.
Love that, Amy. That was, as a director, my favorite time of day was drop-off time in the morning. I would always try to wait right by the door and greet families and children as they were coming in, although it's not always the most ideal time for deep and meaningful conversations. Having that touch point first thing in the morning, as you were saying, just to know that you've sort of greeted everyone, you've had that smile on their face, you're having that moment of connection. It's such a powerful opportunity and diving off point for more connections. other thoughts, other ideas about ways to form connections?
I think sort of similarly to what Amy was saying, pick up and drop off are just a beautiful time, but really just, getting to know all of your families. Like we talked about, asking, it was the sister's birthday. Okay. The sister is too old to come here. She doesn't come here, but we still care about her birthday. How did the weekend go? You went on vacation, you visited grandma and grandpa, just sort of checking in. And even if it is those drive-bys or sort of right in the morning as a touch point, it really means a lot to us and to the families to just have that quick check-in in the morning. And I also think it helps to then expand those relationships beyond that, because you have a really solid basis and you have that level of caring and understanding when a bigger, deep and meaningful conversation or a bigger conversation comes up. You already have that foundation.
I think that's so important. All of what you're saying is so important. And I'm also I'm noting that also what we said was it may be one of the most difficult times to really make that happen, and yet it's so important. I wonder if we can all be brave enough going forward in relationships to be out loud about how it is both difficult and important, and to find ways to do it better. Sarah and I had this incredible opportunity with a school family, a school community recently, to have so many people in a room together talking about how that might be such a perfect time, or a platform such as Playground might be a perfect time, but are there ways that we can do even better within those platforms, within those moments, so that nobody is feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm up to my eyeballs in what I'm supposed to be paying attention to, and I'm supposed to be present with the family. I think you're so right, Mackenzie. It fuels each of us to have those relationships. We just talked about how important they are. As we think about having the right number of teachers to be in ratio, can we also think about the right number of teachers to be in relationship? And I think that we need to make those times as if they are valuable, because they are part of the engagement. It's not like, now that you're tap dancing, on a balance beam, let's try and hold this teacup without spilling it. It really needs to be, let's make time to engage. And I know that a lot of us are sort of on it's certainly not the other side, but we are in a place with staffing as a country. And I don't know, but I don't see any folks on this call right now that are in a different country. But if you are, please speak up. But in the United States, there are some solutions coming in about how we can do better as far as staffing is going. It's not going great yet. Don't even get me wrong. But while we're asking for things, let's ask for what we need for relationships. Let's not just assume that we're going to do the impossible like we have for so long. Let's make engagement something just as important as lunchtime and breaks, and make sure that this is the kind of way that we are prioritizing all the stakeholders, as we talked about earlier. Thank you for that so much. Anything else that's jumping out at you, or are there ways that you're talking about some of these things? I'm also going to say that in our first comment, and Molo Bilingual Montessori, I'm loving that. I'm not sure if Molo is your name, but it might be the name of the Montessori, but whoever you are, I'm so happy that you spoke. And I am also really intrigued by the idea that some of the events that sounded amazing, and I'd like to free up my calendar and go to some of those things, are also required. And it makes me wonder what would happen. It's almost like the question I asked the educator: what if not all the kids had to come to your group time? Would they come? What if not all the educators had to go to this kind of a moment? Would they come? Like, what could we do that would actually make the engagement organic and would help people want to be there, sometimes be paid to be there, of course, but also because it fed them in some way? And I think that's certainly nothing I know the answers to, but I also really feel like we need to ask those questions, because if we're all going towards those things because they feed us, that's going to build the kind of community that's going to really move the needle. Does that inspire any of you to speak to that, or are you doing some things that make you think about that? Anybody? This is our time to chat.
Kathy, I wanted to say something. So this is actually something that I recently realized I'm finding challenging, which never really used to be the case for me. One, coming from a classroom, I would build those relationships with the families. But then, especially during COVID, when we had different drop off and pickup procedures. Myself and my director at the time, we were the ones in charge of everyone had their own procedures, but we used a walkie, and then we would like stand with the parents and wait with them. And I knew every single person's name. I knew how they walked. I knew what they wore and when they dropped off, and if they had showered throughout the day and they picked up in something different, it threw me off. And I was like, I kind of like oddly miss that, because it did bring such a different level of relationship with those parents that is just like, it doesn't happen anymore now. And so I just the other day, I told my assistant director, I was like, for these fairly newer parents, I feel like I just like don't have the same connection with them because they weren't around for that. And so I'm just these questions are making me like really think, okay, how do I get back to that without actually getting back to what we were doing?
So gorgeous, Abby, and such important questions, right? I think for so long during those early COVID days and mid-COVID days, and as we come out of COVID days, people have been talking about going back, and then I hear all this talk about the silver linings, right? And things that we didn't necessarily want to change. And it just, your comment reminds me that there's so much during these past 3.5 years, but also in our lives for us to be inspired by over time. And just because something worked at one phase and then we said, oh, well, we got to go back to the way things were. Sometimes we don't have to go back to the way that things were. And even if we do go back to the way that things were, how can we take some of those big ideas and really allow them to guide us forward, and to keep asking ourselves those questions and to keep noticing? I mean, what an important thing to realize. How can I get to know these families better that I haven't had the chance to get to know yet? Because our structures might have changed, or our systems might have changed, and being able to prioritize that is huge. Really beautiful. I'm going to take a moment to peek at the chat box. I see that there's a few comments coming in here. Oh, I'll read this out, Kathy. I see you responded to it, but just so we can make sure we're all hearing and seeing. Another way to connect with families: weekly emails at the end of the week, highlighting special learning moments or experiences, sharing with families how their children are seen or understood, moments of connection. I love that. I love that. Really being able to highlight what makes each child unique and individual and special, and a special experience they may have had, or forming relationships. My gosh, how much more powerful is it when we're really able to tell a real story versus something more generic, to help families know we really see their children, we really know their children, we're really connected to their children. It makes me think about what's here in number 2 about moving from something more transactional to moving into the relational spaces. So important.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, Sarah, too, that so many of us get caught up, and I feel like it's such an important thing when we have a chance to communicate through technology, through playground, through all of these spaces that we're trying to be in touch with each other. How sometimes in the rush, we're just trying to say, oh yes, I put enough photographs on that thing. I'm sure that they know I cared, and how if we could just dial it back and communicate that what engagement is going to look like in our communities, so that no one is needing to worry that it's a lack of engagement that meant you didn't get 100 photographs that day, but in fact, a very clear intentional plan for making sure that we're as present as we can be with each child, with each family member, and that there will be communication, but it might happen only at a certain time, or it might happen in a way that is really targeted and not necessarily just a huge amount of paparazzi kind of moments. I'm curious what you all think about that. I've heard so much stress out there in the world that some classrooms are trying to keep up with others, and some are feeling like this means we didn't care or we didn't look, and others are really just checking the box. Is that something that you're finding a struggle, or something that you think about as a community? And what a great opportunity on this particular call to think about it. Anybody who hasn't had a chance to share, especially, are you feeling like this is something that you're grappling with when it comes to engagement through communication?
So I feel like as a community right now, our school is struggling a little bit, and not necessarily in terms of like teacher family communication, but more in terms of just the general feel of how parents feel about our school. And I think this has been kind of a good refresher. I mean, I think that we always, like, our main goal is to have these open doors and to really listen and to be open and honest. And I think that that's something that we've always strived for. You know, I'm the assistant director of a program, and I was in a classroom all year last year because we didn't have enough teachers. So I was doing 2 jobs, and it was like, so we're trying to kind of, I feel like now that I'm out of the classroom, kind of rethink how we are kind of approaching families. You know, even yesterday, my office is kind of not right in the front, and I was doing pickup at the end of the day. And usually I sit in my office and I'm like doing work. And the other day I was like, why am I sitting in here? Like, I don't see any of the parents. So I like moved my body, you know, up front, because I was like, this is really important that I'm able to kind of check in with parents. And you know, and I do that every now and then, but it's not like a consistent things. But maybe it needs to be that kind of like, you know, kind of that same sort of thing where when COVID was around, you know, we were outside greeting all the families, and now, you know, I'm sitting in my office doing work, and, you know, I see them through the window and I see them coming in, you know, but I don't necessarily have that same engagement that maybe I would have before. So, you know, I think for me, it's just, that was a very roundabout answer.
It was a perfect answer. It was right on. And I think, Katie, what's so important is we're trying so hard to get it done. We're trying so hard to engage. We're also trying to do it while in a transactional mode. And I think it will feel better if we can just out loud as a community say, we are a relational school. We are a relational school a few years out of the center of COVID and in the middle of a staffing crisis. So here is how we are trying to address engagement. How as a community do we feel about that? Instead of how do I, Katie Homer, in my own office, quietly on my own trying to check the box, feel about that? I think these are issues that we need to solve as a community. And when we all come together and we're able to lean into what we can do now and what is really required to do what is best, it is often much less complex than we're making it. And it means that everybody has a chance to put their oxygen mask on first. And that if we're absolutely appreciating the educator, the family member, and the child on equal footing, then no one would put themselves as a sacrifice to the other two. And we really need to go back to establishing that on the first tour with a family and on the first interview with a teacher. I think it is, again, part of the retention technique that will keep people coming back for more, not just as families, who many of us don't have problems with numbers wise, but also for educators to feel seen and heard and valued. All of these things work for both of us. And I think it's just so important that you're not trying to solve by yourself the questions that only a community that is engaged can solve. Does that make any sense? This is hard stuff. It's really hard stuff.
It makes lots of sense. And the balance, the struggle is balancing what you truly have the capacity to do genuinely and to do well versus what are the compliance issues versus what do you know, just there's so many competing needs. But I think telling families, we are trying, here's what we're doing, here's how you can help us, and here's how we can help you. And there's a lot in the middle, and join us. And saying that like almost every day. I don't know.
I 100%. And I do also feel that, yes, people are paying to be in a situation where they're getting certain services for that pay. But at the same time, I remember that time a few years ago when everybody was like, do you think people would pay a little more at a grocery store to understand the way that people are appreciated and respected, the way that coffee is grown, the way that things might feel a little less big corporation? Not everybody wants that. But if we as the educators can ask for that and talk about the kind of communities and worlds we're building in our own centers, I think that's going to change the needle. And I do think it hasn't come up yet. and maybe the next slide, actually, Sarah, might be the best thing that we can show at this point. But I think that when we're talking about all of these issues in relationship, we cannot leave out the idea of advocacy and the idea that each of us in community can do better. Nobody has to be building a relationship and giving it all away. We know in our own lives how dangerous that is when there is not a sense of community or compromise, or each of us giving what we can and getting what we need to be fed. And so Michelle King, who's somebody that Sarah and I've gotten to know recently, and all of actually the new so many wonderful people have been working for the National Association for the Education of Young Children for years, but this new group, especially of people that are caring so deeply about moving forward at no one stakeholder's expense, means that we need to think together about issues of advocacy all together. And when she talks about this here, and when maybe Sarah reads it to us in just a moment before we close out this portion, I think what's really important is, even if you didn't think of yourself as an advocate before, and even if families didn't come in sort of knowing that that's something that our community was going to stand up for, there's no time like the present to try hard to see how we can all do better in relationship together and not just by ourselves. So Sarah, I'd love to hear this one out loud. It really helps me.
Powerful one.
Direction.
Powerful. So Michelle says, as one of the tenets of developmentally appropriate practice, families are always at the forefront of educators' minds and practices. This dedication is a hallmark of our profession. Early childhood teachers have a deep commitment to young children and their families. However, as a society, we illustrate time and time again that we do not reciprocate the same level of commitment to the same educators who are doing this for young children and families. And Michelle goes on to talk about how NAEYC is trying to change that narrative and is changing that narrative. And together we are all helping to change that narrative. But I couldn't agree more, Kathy, that idea that all stakeholders must be equally valued, that as educators, we must value these relationships, value ourselves, and help the world see the importance of our field and of the work that we're doing. It's how we engage with everyone around us. It's the most important thing we can be doing. So with that, I want to thank you for joining us in today's session. And I will turn it back over now to Jess to give time for any questions and answers and wrap us up today.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Kathy. I think that was awesome. And thank you all so much for being here and for sharing. I know I learned a lot, and I think this was a really important webinar. So I'm really glad you all came. I want to share my screen really quickly, as well as open it up to questions. So we at Playground compiled this resource. So if anybody would like to download it, you can scan the QR code on your phone. We'll also be sending it out in our follow-up email. So all of you will be getting this resource sent to your email as well. But if you'd like it right away, it's here. And this is just a compilation of some thoughts on family engagement, a letter from Sarah and Kathy, some ideas on how to use technology to enhance your community. So we really hope that you find that helpful. And yeah, if anyone has questions, feel free to come off mute. For those of you who need to run, again, thank you so much for joining us. But we'll be here for the next few minutes if anybody has anything that they'd like to add.
Thank you to everybody that participated. It's nice to have thought partners and struggle partners in this work. So thank you, because it's the greatest work that we could possibly be doing in the world, I think. So just thank you to everybody. This is a tough time of day.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you to all of you so much for being here, for sharing, for participating, and for being present for one another and for this community. Being in thought partnership couldn't agree more, the most important thing we can do.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. We are happy to answer any questions and look forward to connecting with you all again soon.
All right, looks like we'll wrap it up. Look out for an email from us if you'd like to share this recording with any of your colleagues or friends. We'll have it available on demand on our website, as well as some contact information for Sarah and Kathy if you'd like to reach out. So thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.